the Dodman Bandits. Hope everyone had a wonderful 4th of July. We are continuing the party today, this Friday, with Dana Moreshead. Dana started out editing books at Marvel. He moved up to doing special projects for them. A number of huge projects that Marvel did throughout the 90s into the 2000s. He's also worked with Stanley Productions, working with Stan directly. Also works now with Walt Disney and all these other theme parks. Such a incredible career doing things that we can only dream about as fans. So you're going to hear some wonderful stories in just about a second because this is Dana Moreshead. Mr. Dana Moreshead. Dana, thank you so much for taking the time.
Anytime. I'm glad you called. How
So
in the world did you get to me anyway? Have you run out of every comic creator on the planet that like this is the last show? This is it?
we are Facebook friends, and you post some very cool stuff. And I was just like, all right, this seems like someone who I'd like to get to know a little bit more about. So there you go.
Fair
But
enough.
no, you're not bottom of the list. When we start talking to like 10-year-olds who are drawing, naked girls in their notebook and asking how they got into art, that's when we know we've sort of hit rock bottom.
Those you never know who those kids are going to grow up to be.
That's true. They could be the next who knows who.
Exactly.
So speaking of kids, how did you begin your journey into comics?
Oh, so I was two.
Okay.
The first book I ever had, I got from my father's barber. I'm a little upset that I know all of this. And I think it was Batman 219,
Mhm.
which has got a gorgeous Neil Adams cover. But it's Batman being pushed out of the plane by, I think, a rifleman or a politician, like over Washington, D.C. It's a really sort of insane. And it's been ever since.
Wow.
Ever since, yeah. Yeah. Really kind of crazy.
At what point do you say to yourself, maybe this is an industry I want to see myself getting into as a professional?
There was a brief blip in like junior high
Mhm.
where I was like, oh, I think I want to be, I didn't think I had the talent to be a penciler.
Mhm.
And at some point, I'm like, well, maybe I could be an inker and then learn how to do this. And I was doing a comic that never got completed with a friend of mine because I didn't know that the art pages were two up.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to replicate, you know, the lines from George Perez and Joe Sinnott, these gorgeous, clean lines. And there's my crappy little marker that's bleeding all over the place. And it was very discouraging. But I loved art and I loved to draw from a really young age. So my parents, who were on the older side,
Mhm.
never balked when I said commercial design.
Mhm.
So it wasn't comics per se, but it was always some element of, you know, advertising, promotions, whatever it was. And then really comics always seemed like something unattainable until I did an internship at Marvel, a reluctant internship at that, if you can believe it. And that turned into almost 9, 10 years at Marvel. So, you just say yes to a lot of things and keep your eyes open. So
And you pursued being a colorist there.
no,
Okay.
everything that I've done in comics, this is terrible advice. So anybody that's listening, don't take it. Was almost accidental.
Okay.
I had done. I was supposed to. And by the way, your podcast. I'm not a huge podcast fan, but after you contacted me, I fell down the rabbit hole, and it was just one after the other. And Terry Cavanaugh, who you've had on a few
Yep.
times, Terry was the guy I interned for,
Okay.
and Terry, I think maybe might had just an amazing run of interns that went on to do other stuff. So like Mark Guggenheim was
Mhm.
was Terry's intern, Mike Thomas was like all these interns. Anyway, um, there was a weekend coming up where like everybody was out of the office, and there was one freelancer who shall remain nameless that was late, like late with the art showing up, and then late showing up that day. So I was an intern. I wasn't going anywhere. I offered to stay and basically wait for the artwork so everybody could go begin their weekend.
Mhm.
I mean, he didn't roll in till like 3:30 and the piece wasn't done.
Right.
So I stayed there while he finished it in the bullpen or in John Romita, his Raiders office.
Mhm.
And just because I took it home over the weekend and did a color guide for it, because I knew that this book had to go out Monday, had to, or Tuesday, whichever day was back in the office. So I just did it and left it in a pile with all the stuff that Terry and Kelly and everybody wanted me to do. And Terry's like, "Oh, there's a great voucher for it." And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, "It's great. We'll use it. We'll voucher for it." And that began this long, career in coloring and writing. Terry was just the best.
Mhm.
Like Terry and Fabian and Nicieza are directly responsible for me having a career at all. But really, Terry was just amazing. And from the minute you do one gig, there's another one, another one. Back in those days, everything needed to go on time. Like there was if your book shipped late, everybody was in trouble. So there were many times where just being in the New York area
Mhm.
in the office was critical to getting a project done. And I can't tell you how many jobs I did where the editor's like, they didn't have time to even FedEx it to a colorist. So they were desperate for people in house. And I was just thrilled to do it. So there's to this day, there's still no better thrill than seeing your name sort of in the credits page. So I would love to say I got past that, but you never do.
No, of course not. Now, what is the key to being a good colorist to make the art really stand out to the readers?
That's a great question. One is, I'd been to art school. I went to Pratt in Brooklyn, New York, so I had the basics of color theory down. But it's really part of it is just getting it done.
Right.
Because at some point, when the book needs to leave tomorrow, unless you're coloring Spider-Man totally wrong, it's all fine.
Yeah.
And this is back before, again, for anybody listening, back before computers,
Mhm.
back before you could do separations. These were color guides with little call outs to the 32 or 42 different colors you could use.
Mhm.
And then part of it was storytelling.
Mhm.
I always tried to get the plot so I could understand what was going on, and really looking at our favorite colorists
Mhm.
and then how those changed as we were working. So like Glynis Oliver, whose name I'd seen for years and years and years, till you get in and start to look, especially if you're getting reference for if she had done the issue before, you get that book in and you start looking at it and you're like, holy, there's a whole other level of storytelling here that you're not necessarily aware of.
Mhm.
So, and then it's a matter of like looking around and seeing who else and who does what. And you'd see something amazing that like Michael Golden had colored, and you're like, oh, for one panel, I just want to borrow that magenta and red and cyan overlay. Um, but it's really a matter of following the story,
Mhm.
trying to enhance what everybody's done, or more importantly, not get in the way of it. So, there were stories that I'd written. There was a Black Knight story that I did plot, but Terry gave me the script where I was on the phone with the colorist telling him like, okay, this scene's now going to be at night. This scene's going to be this other time because he's coloring, while I'm doing the script.
Mhm.
So, it's just about telling a good story and whatever it takes to get that done. So
Are they the biggest unsung heroes of comics? Because we always hear about the penciler and we hear about the inker, how they embellish the pencils. But if it's not for the colorist, a lot of the action, a lot of the things we see aren't in burned into our brains as well.
you're not kidding. And there's two unsung hero, and I think there's two unsung heroes for me in
Mhm.
comics. I can't say no to the colorists. Um, Paul Mounts,
Mhm.
Dean White, Glynis Oliver. I mean, the list of colorists who are just phenomenal. Just they go on and on and on and on. Uh, but I think a lot of colorists, because you're no longer linked to whatever printer is doing the separations, and now you can control and paint, and really the colorist can do almost anything that they want to do on the computer. I think they're getting a lot more credit.
Okay.
I think the unsung hero of comics is the editor.
Mhm.
It's the worst job. It's simultaneously the best job in the world and the worst job in the world, because you can't go anywhere without somebody handing you a script or asking for work or doing whatever. It's really, I've seen, I don't want to rat anybody out. I got to make sure. I once watched a freelancer
Mhm.
hit up an editor at a urinal during their at their wedding.
Yeah.
So, and I get it. Like, everybody's got a mortgage to pay or a car that they want or whatever else. But
Right.
yeah, it's tough, man. That's a rough gig. That's a rough gig.
I always ask editors because it's has to be difficult because you want to get the best out of people and encourage them. But there are times you're gonna have a tough conversation with certain folks, and it might be certain folks who are big names in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and that takes a bit of fortitude to go in and be like, listen, this just isn't what we're looking for, because that person would be like, you do know who I am?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because you've got a group of freelancers that you are probably friends or friendly with,
Right.
and then yeah, there's an awful lot of pressure.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of pressure. But again, I grew up in the industry at, I think, the perfect time
Mhm.
where everything, comics were getting huge. It was right before the gigantic boom with X Force, X-Men #1. I mean, Todd's Spider-Man. Um, and I always credit Terry Kavanaugh's office when he had Marvel Comics Presents.
Yeah.
That guy taught me how to juggle.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've seen. I've been lucky enough to work with some of the best editors around, even directly or indirectly.
Mhm.
Nobody. I don't think anybody got as much out of so many as Terry. And I'll do my best to stop like his accolades, but
Oh no, I'm a big Terry Kavanaugh supporter too, so I can sing his
huge. I
praises all
mean,
day.
just so that Marvel Comics Presents thing was just every creator under the sun that had 5 minutes, might do a cover, might do something else. Um, it is. I don't want to make it seem all doom and gloom. It is ridiculously friendly, and I think you'll see a lot of editor, artist, writer teams,
Right.
because when you're given an assignment, as an editor or a creative director or whatever you're working on, you call the people that are going to get the job done most of the time, especially if you've got a challenging deadline.
Right.
So, Bobby Chase and Peter David, Howard Mackey,
Mhm.
you see these sort of teams begin to navigate through, and it makes a lot of sense.
One more question about being a colorist is, when you're doing it, is continuity more important for the colorist than it might be for the penciler or the inker, just to keep it as it's been previously through the books, or do you have a little more leeway?
I think every continuity is important for everybody.
Okay.
So I don't think it's any more or less important for the colorist. I think the colorist does have. Well, that's not true. I think all the creative trades have a responsibility to the issue before, and then the colorist also has a responsibility to the art team,
Mhm.
because there are plenty of artists who have preferred colorists, and that's just a taste.
Right.
You know what I mean? There are people that like heavy saturated colors over their work. There are people that like big open blank spaces.
Mhm.
Um, I think I'm trying to think. I colored one Alan Davis story,
Okay.
and I think that's one of the few times that I was actually nervous,
Mhm.
because it just, Alan is still just one of the most amazing artists out there. And you're just, the British sensibility against the US sensibility against what the editor wants. I mean, there's a whole other thing,
Yeah.
is that, whether you're doing a fill-in issue or a regular issue, like there's sort of a look and feel, certainly in the 90s of the book. So, but I don't think it's any more or less than the rest of the team. So
What artist did you feel most comfortable coloring?
I loved coloring Jay Lee.
Okay.
Lots of big open spaces, lots of gradients, which were, newish
Yeah.
at that time. The Alan Davis story. I loved coloring. A lot of work. Not
Right.
complaining, but a lot of work. Um, I think I did some James Fry was great. there were a lot of really challenging pieces. There was a Whilce Portacio Uncanny X-Men that I colored
Mhm.
over a fax of pencils
Wow.
just to get it done, because the group, that group of creators were all on the West Coast,
Mhm.
and again, kids, no internet, so you had to put something in a box. You needed to make a truck that was going to a plane that was going in the sky that was landing on the ground to get it to the office. So anytime you could not do that
Mhm.
was you saved days and days on the schedule. So there was lots of that. I don't think, no, I didn't really have a favorite. It was just fun. I mean, it was work, but it was fun.
Right.
You
It,
know, it just it
you,
just it just was.
you mentioned Jay Lee because his art, I think of him a little bit more like Mark Texeira, which is a lot of blacks. It really, like, you knew a Jay Lee piece of art from anyone else at the time. Like when he was doing Submariner and stuff like that, like you knew exactly who was doing that. Someone with such a distinct style. How did you said you liked working with it. How did you work together on that? Because it really did stand out so much.
I mean, he did some projects for me as an artist, but like we never spoke about
Oh,
color. And honestly, in a number of cases, just because the schedule is so hectic, you know, my my responsibility to the artist, besides some bizarre moral creative compass, was really if they left notes in the margin
okay.
and to follow those as best as you could.
Gotcha.
And it really was establishing, and quite frankly, the artist was off doing the next issue, which was probably already late.
Right.
So, you were doing, in half an issue. Sometimes I think the fastest I ever did an issue, I think I did a full issue of Namor in a day.
Wow.
Yeah. Not anybody's, certainly not my best work, but it got done.
Right.
And then it comes out and there's separator mistakes and there's little problems, and or tricks that worked that came out great. There was in one of those rush issues,
Mhm.
rush for me. There was an effect I tried and I crossed my fingers and hoped it would work, and it came out great, and we kept using it.
Right.
So, which was just this underwater sequence and getting the tones right, and making sure that it's clear to the reader where everybody is.
Makes
And
sense.
especially a book where it's underwater, but different locations underwater. It's not like it's the Baxter building here and it's the Avengers West Coast compound over here. It's like there's a castle underwater and there's another castle in a different part of the water. How do you make that, at least so when you transition scenes, you're like, oh, I'm at the bad guy's place.
That
So
makes sense.
yeah.
So let's jump ahead a little bit because you get promoted to Director of Creative Services and Special Projects at Marvel.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
So I'm going to take a brief step back.
Okay.
I did an internship. The internship was amazing. It ended, and Terry said, the next time you're in town, if you got a portfolio, because he hadn't seen my design portfolio, my graphic design portfolio, bring it up. I'd love to see it. Now, this is code for goodbye, but you're young. It's a polite way of saying like, "Yeah, okay."
Yeah.
Uh, but you're young and you're stupid. So sure enough, the next time I was in town at some art director's thing, I just moseyed up to the office. And I mean, I wish I could have a photo of his face because he's trying to still get the same amount of books out. And here comes his former intern, like, hey, here's my portfolio. You wanted to see it. And I literally had it. He made time for me, bless his heart. And as I have it there, Fabian walked in, who was freelance. Now back then you could be on staff and freelance for the
Yeah.
company. So Fabian walks in and he goes, hands in the things to Terry, and he's like, "Oh, wait, you're that designer guy that was an intern. Yeah, my boss wants to bring design in house. We currently have an agency, but there's a lot more work coming. You should go talk to him." So I went and talked to him,
Mhm.
and I think 4 weeks later I was working there as a associate art director, junior art director, or some
Mhm.
thing. And I was my boss was this guy named Mark Erickson's former like Saatchi and Saatchi ad guy, um, pretty renowned in his field. And I anytime he got a new assignment, he would throw me on it. So like we developed a group in-house that handled advertising out. So I'm actually looking at posters in the background, for Extinction Agenda that we did. There's a Sleepwalker poster there that we did. There's the X-Men one. I'm like, gee, I can't believe that those still are around. Um, but and then advertising in corporate. So as we're doing ad sales and whatever else, we're working on the creative there, built a little team there, and I really settled in with merchandising and licensing,
Okay.
which before I got there was, essentially one, there was a lawyer, an assistant, associate, a manager, if I'm going to be accurate. And then I think Tom Brevoort and Bob Budiansky in
Mm.
editorial. So, with the exception of trading cards, because I mean, Bob and Tom were the king.
Yeah.
We were pulling all that away. The company was expanding. I think I gave them some level of comfort that some Yutz wasn't coming in and just sort of, you know, they both knew me from being an intern and being an editorial. So, yeah, I got this tremendous um, uh, at the time. I mean, you couldn't even do this today. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I got promoted to the what was a director of creative services and special projects, which basically meant anything they wanted me to do that nobody else wanted to do, I was the guy. And I loved it. I had a small team of, up to 6 people,
Okay.
and we were handling everything licensed from, you know, uh, embroidered socks
Mhm.
to the theme park in Orlando and everything in between. Um, so and we did great work on it. We had Marvel had great licensees most of the time, and really there was always a fan on one side of the table. So it was a great gig. It was an absolute great gig. And I got to work on just a slew of the craziest. I mean, video games was a tremendous category, apparel, creating the style guides that were going out for merchandising.
Mhm.
Um, Floats. I did two floats for Marvel. One definitely, but floats. I just yeah, it was fantastic. It was a fantastic gig. And it happened because we were there, and quite frankly, we did a good job. I
Right.
mean, that's really the net. And we, like I said, we had great, not alone.
Right.
There's tremendous team in the mechanism that makes that happen. But we did good work, and we had great response from the fans. So that's how it happens.
Was there anything that you wanted to bring that wasn't happening at Marvel at the time? Like ideas that you had to expand?
I'm sure there was. I don't remember any of them. It was a tremendously, I mean, today we'd call it a collaborative environment, but everybody was either bailing out the boat or building the boat as you were going. We were most of the time building the plane in the air. Pick your favorite version of that. But I think excuse me, the one thing that we tried to do, we did right after I left,
Mhm.
which was simplify the Marvel logo.
Okay.
That old Marvel Comics logo, which was done by a staffer, and I should remember her name. Anyway, it really didn't reproduce well at different sizes. It's a very intricate logo with a lot of lines.
Mhm.
And we'd pitched just sort of slicing the bottom part of that off and just doing the Marvel logo. And we pitched and pitched and pitched and pitched. And anytime somebody were like, "Oh, it doesn't reproduce," we're like, "Here's what you could do." And I think one of the people on my team who took over after I left was a guy named Mike Thomas, and I remember him calling me saying, "Like, we got him, we got him, we got him to do it." And then, as a little coda to that, just because life likes to keep our egos in check,
Mhm.
I was looking at Alex J's book.
Mhm.
He's got a book on logos, which has got a ton of beautiful stuff that he did at DC and Marvel. And what he's got in there is the sort of beheaded Marvel logo that we were all proud of, which he then dissected and fixed all the really sort of reprehensible typography in it. I'm looking at it. I remember getting Jay's book and looking at it and going, how did I not see that? Like, why? You're right. He's right, by the way. He was totally right.
Yeah.
So, like, the Marvel logo, everybody knows Jay reshaped, but it's all from that initial DNA. But no, it was a great team. We were constantly, either challenged or challenging each other with deadlines and projects and just volume. There were thousands of
Mhm.
licensees, and there were international agents that needed to be trained, and there was no time. There
Right.
was no time. Stuff was just getting done.
I'm very curious because at what point did you personally say, because this is a high leverage job, this is something that was very important to Marvel. You say to yourself, I can do this. I can handle these high level things. I can handle this kind of pressure and do a good job that you felt comfortable with what you were doing.
Well, I mean, the real answer is never.
Okay.
I think we all suffer from that moment of imposter syndrome. But there was a moment, and I can't tell you what year, uh, but I remember sitting in the Marvel conference room on the 12th floor, just in a meeting with a new potential licensee or a licensee, and we're having a discussion. And there was a moment in that meeting where I was like, oh crap, like I know what I'm doing, which is a very surreal, like out of body experience when you're like, oh, okay, all right, let's do it. I mean, but I mean, that's part of the uh, in the commercial artist
Mhm.
category. That's the artist part
Okay.
where you're just like constantly. I'm not a big fan of fake it till you make it,
Right.
but say yes to things that you know you can do,
Mhm.
or you think you can do.
Yeah. No, I agree
So
100%.
yeah. So yeah, never. You're always thinking. You're always terrified if you're not on the. I think most of the time you're really on a creatively on a tight rope,
Mhm.
waiting to fall over. And then sometimes, and honestly, you do sometimes. You mess up or you fail or you spell something wrong or whatever else. And we always learn more from our mistakes than our successes most of the time. So you've just got to kind of be open for that and doing course corrections and apologizing a little bit and moving on.
And one thing you mentioned a number of times was the team that you had that was helping you. How did you put the right people in the right positions?
I always wanted our theme song to be that A team
Mhm.
opening. Um, I had a great crew. Some of it fell into place out of sheer necessity. So like uh, my number two there was this guy named Mike Thomas who I met at Pratt,
Mhm.
who'd also taken over the school's I think took over the school's creative writing magazine or the comic magazine for me. Mike was one of the first hires I had in place. I inherited somebody. His name is Joel, who was absolutely great.
Right.
I had there were just teams of people that came in. We pulled a guy named Steve Bailing who had gone to film school, but was either on a temp gig with our not the head of marketing, but one of the heads of marketing. And when I found out that he was a writer and he'd done screenplay, so that meant he understood 3-act structure, 9-act structure. Like I was like, him,
Yeah.
can we steal you? How'd you like to come down? Interviewed, and he was on the team. We inherited a guy named Rob LaQuinta from Techno Comics, who came in through a recommendation of. I feel like I'm going to need to bend over to start picking up all these names that I'm dropping. I'm sorry. Um, so somebody else from Pratt, Rebecca Gay, who's maybe most famous for her work on Magic the Gathering.
Mhm.
Um, she's like, oh, I got this friend, he's looking for him, like bring him in. And he was with the team for a long time. It's just one after the other. So, and like I said, we were doing so much work
Mhm.
that if you could survive and not blow any deadlines, you were part of the team. I mean, the job itself was a bonding experience. So
Makes sense.
yeah. Plus by the way, all the other people, the salespeople, sales and creative are always like this.
Right.
But and by the way, for anybody who's listening, I'm smashing my fists together. But that pretty quickly turns into a handshake.
Right.
Um, so and they had a great marketing team, and yeah, it was a great group on all sides.
Where do you get to start working with Stanley Media?
Wow. Okay. So Stan, I had met when I was in New York a few times because he's Stan and he's in New York. But I moved out to LA for Marvel in '94, I
Okay.
think. And Stan was sort of, because he had an LA office, he was usually in our offices, either directly or indirectly.
Mhm.
So we saw him a little bit in the offices. And then at one point, we were all in the exact same office, like feet away from each other. We all had our different areas that we dealt with, but we'd see each other every day.
Mhm.
I left Marvel. I was like, after the theme park, it was 10 years if you throw in the internship, and I was like, I'm finally have the wherewithal to be a freelancer.
Mhm.
Takes a lot of don't the freelancing folks. That's tough
Yeah.
because that's the siren call of video games and reading and sitting in the sun is very loud. So I'm like, I now have the discipline. I'm going to do this. So I think I left on a Friday.
Mhm.
Saturday morning, I'm at the other side of the place where I'm living. I'm out of the shower,
Mhm.
and my I get this call from the other room, which is Stanley's on the phone for you. And I yell back, I don't know any Stanleys. Take a message. And they say, no, 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 Stan Lee.
Mhm.
So here I am running in a towel the length of the house, and I'm like, Stan, what's up? And things I shouldn't admit, but I will. He's like, "How you doing? I heard you left. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I wasn't there on the last day. But I don't know what you do. But everybody seems to like you, and you work hard. Come work for me." And that was Saturday, and I think I was working with them by Tuesday. So
Nice.
I was the eighth employee at Stanley Media at the time, which was just the most surreal. Like Stan was always there, and but now you're working with him, 5 days a week, sometimes six or seven. It was tremendous. It was absolutely fantastic.
So
So
he
he
basically
called.
said,
To answer your question, he called me.
and he said, I don't know what you do,
I
but
know what
people,
you do, but people seem to like you, and I know you work hard. I'm like, okay, all right. But Stan calls, and you go.
yeah, that's sort of how things work.
Yeah.
What was the idea behind Stanley Media? What did he want to do different than what he was able to do at Marvel?
I don't think he was looking to do anything different. I think that he had this opportunity with some business partners
Mhm.
to do on the internet
Right.
what he did in print. So he really was um, an absolute powerhouse.
Mhm.
I hope I have half his energy
Mhm.
when I was half his age. I mean, he was in his 70s and he was still very sharp. Loved working with artists, loved working with writers, was very involved on the creative side.
Mhm.
And you really just can't uh, you just want to be near that. He was like a power battery. It was really amazing. Um, I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
Oh, no, I'm also curious. The Stanley we see as fans,
Yeah.
same guy that you see in the office?
So yes, and
Mhm.
I don't think it's betraying any confidences. Every once in a while, he would swear,
Okay.
which really doesn't seem like anything, but because we were all used to reading the soapbox
Right.
column and seeing him on interviews, and he was like that, but he was also a human being.
Right.
And in a small confined group, he would drop an f-bomb now and then, and everybody in the room that was a comic fan would start to titter and giggle and what he said. Was he like that 100% of the time? No, but he was that. He
Right.
was that most of the time. He was that energetic. He was that enthusiastic.
Mhm.
Um, you know, he was that and more.
So you come in sort of with the clean slate, like you said. He knew he just wanted you on the team.
Yeah.
Do you create your own position, or are you brought to that position on the team?
It really, I've always sort of tried to do whatever needs to get done.
Okay.
So whatever needed to get done, we worked on. So it wound up being licensing out special projects, which included the Backstreet Boys comic and a few, essentially anything that wasn't online.
Gotcha.
And even then, there was all sorts of referrals. There were some great talent and artists we had in house. Dave Johnson was on staff there for a while. Sean McManus, Aaron Sode. I mean, just one after the other. These like the bullpen there was like a top 100 artists working in the business. They were fantastic. Armando Gil, like it was crazy the number of people that were there.
Oh, all right.
Oh, sorry.
No, I just so how did you because you became VP of Creative Services and Brand Management? Did you move up to that position, or was that what you were given as soon as you got there?
Um, they threw some extra words on it as it progressed, and the industry had expectations of certain titles. I remember the brand management was added because there was a meeting with some investor, and they asked the question like, "Who's doing brand management?"
Right.
And somebody came in, and they were like, "Who's doing brand management?" And I was like, "Well, like we're developing the logos and the look
Mhm.
for some of these shows. We're not doing like there were animators and Stan of course was working on all the design stuff, but we were doing the logos to make sure that they would work on in flash animation and to make sure that they would work on t-shirts and at one point action figures. So
Right.
I sort of grew into the role and they would just throw stuff on. It was only 2 years, so but we
Yeah.
just kept you just do the work that needs to get done, a lot of late nights,
Mhm.
and yeah, you just try to deliver your absolute what are the best you can do with the time and resources you're allowed.
Mhm.
So and again, say yes a lot. So when the Backstreet project came up rather quickly, and everybody's like, I don't know if we can get this done. I'm like, sure we can. We'll figure it out. We have freelancers. We have talent on staff. We have freelancers available to us. Like we'll find a way to get it done, and we did. So
How often did you have to pinch yourself that you're having conversation with Stan Lee and that he knows you and you're right there with him?
a lot,
Yeah.
a real lot, and it wouldn't just as soon as you'd sort of lull yourself into it because he really was like one of the team.
Right.
Um, which sounds weird saying it, but it's when I was talking to other people. So somebody would say like, "Oh, what'd you do today?" And I would do something, and they're like, "Wait a minute, wait a minute. What do you mean, Stanley?" I'm like, "Well, Stan Lee and Steve Gerber are in the. Oh crap,
Right.
that's my job now. That's weird."
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. It was with other people when they would sort of glass over, and
Mhm.
you're like, "Yeah, okay, I'm going to pinch myself because it's a great gig." Daily is the answer to the question. Daily.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it really was. It really was.
And in time, you worked 20th Century Fox,
Yep.
Disney.
Yeah.
I mean, these are huge, huge companies. How much of what you've learned, either with Stan or at Marvel, helped you succeed and get to those positions?
Absolutely everything.
Yeah.
There's nothing. The best part about working in the creative, whether it's in the creative arts, is that you build this. And when I taught, I would use this analogy, but you have this toolbox.
Mhm.
So everything you do, whether you're going to use it like right now or tomorrow, or 10 years from now. So there's things that I learned in college about silk screening and color theory,
Mhm.
and I specifically remember commiserating with some classmates about like, when are we ever going to use this kind of color theory I'm going to use it coloring. I'm going to use it coloring comics. Oh, and determining the colors on a poster. And oh yeah, I'm going to use it every day.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, everything. I learned how to juggle from Terry Cavanaugh. I learned about deadlines from Pratt and Marvel and Stan Lee.
Mhm.
I learned a lot about the internet working at Stanley Media.
Mhm.
There was a company after that called StatCard. I learned a lot about back-end servers and online competition and online gaming there. It was freelance in there for 15, 18 years. 20th Century Fox is a lot of the same skill sets.
Mhm.
that came in that, learned at Marvel, learned at Stan, learned at StatCard, learned freelancing. You never, see if I get this right, you never not have your toolbox.
Right.
So, and you're always, and that's sort of the key. And there's stuff I learned at 20th that I took during, and then Disney bought 20th,
Mhm.
um, that you learn there, and you learn a ton at Disney.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing, and that's another place where you're pinching yourself every day. And for 20th Century Fox, we were in the, if you've seen Die Hard, Nakatomi Plaza,
Yeah.
that's the building that the office was in. I don't, every day that I walked into that place, it's just a reminder. I'm like, I'm in the Die Hard building. Like that's a good day.
Right.
Um, and even that, like, driving to Disney, as long as that commute was for me,
Mhm.
um, you drive up and you pass. When we started, we were on the main campus,
Right.
but you driving past the Imagineering building and the Disney proper, and you're like, how did this happen? But it happens. I can't figure it out. Lots of pinching, lots of bruising.
I say, and Disney seems like the most well-oiled machine out there that everything they do, it's done, not to a certain, I would say to perfection, but there is a very high level
Absolutely.
that is put on everyone to make sure it is done right. Whether it's, you go to the parks, the way the, visitors are treated there to what we see on, Disney Plus now with the shows. Like there's a level there that's different than everything else.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really, there's a lot of it comes from internal motivation.
Mhm.
You're in the same way that when you're working with Stan,
Right.
you have, whether it's been asked of you or not, there's this interior sense of responsibility
Right.
to perform and to show them that you kind of deserve to be there, or more importantly, that you deserve to be there.
Right.
Um, Disney's filled with the best of the best of the best. And you're also working with, our group's domain, which is location based experiences, really dealt with a lot of the 20th century IP. So, like, we're working with James Cameron's group and Lightstorm, and that's as high up there as you can get. There was a project we were working on where we were plotting out the animations of a banshee from Avatar,
Yeah.
and their head animator has, I don't know, 5, 6 Oscars to his, like you're in the room with that level of talent.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's simultaneously intimidating,
Right.
and just awe-inspiring. And you're like, I love being the dumbest guy in the room,
Mhm.
because it's nothing but learning all over the place. Like, there's every little bit, you're just soaking it up and soaking it up and soaking it up. So, yeah, I think that most of the time it's an internal mechanism, and it's the good manifestation of pride
Right.
in business. So, nobody wants to be the person that slips.
Of course.
So,
For someone who's worked on so many mind-blowing projects, the coolest one you've worked on that, you put to the top of the list when it starts to time to brag a little bit.
you're asking which one it is?
Yeah.
It depends on who I'm talking to. For the longest time, it was the Marvel's theme park in Orlando. That was an amazing team. That was 5 years of my life in and out, plus all the other stuff
Right.
that was going on. But for the longest time, it was that, and there are days where it's still that.
Okay.
But we did a touring exhibition with for Avatar.
Mhm.
I think I'd put it first-ish because it's so relatively new.
Mhm.
It was something we planned during the pandemic,
Okay.
which is just nearly impossible. And we did the touring exhibition didn't tour that much because it was so popular. It wound up staying in location, but we did a version of it with so it's 20th Century Fox, it's Lightstorm Entertainment, it's Disney, of course,
Mhm.
our team, and a licensee named Neon, and we built if I do say so, and again, when I say me, it wasn't me. It was teams of people that know exactly what they're doing.
Mm.
Um, but for at Gardens by the Bay, which is like the only way I can describe it is a 5-story or a 6-story indoor terrarium.
Mhm.
It's got a 5-story waterfall in it.
Wow.
We were able to not only put these avatar based interactions and sculptures and things around this amazing location,
Right.
um, but then to have it succeed and stay. And we did a night show. And I think because again we were all coming out of COVID, there were lots of unknowns. And at some point, the our hosts at Garden by the Bay, who were fantastic, said, "Okay, we're going to stay open a little later. We'll give it a test." So to land on the ground, sort of not quite knowing if we could pull it off in time, and then pulling it off, and they did just an amazing job. And there's examples I use to this day when I'm talking about location-based experiences or producing events that is really still it's hard to match. It's hard to match. So, and then other stuff. So like if you're in a room with licensing people,
Mhm.
I think I talk about creating the first digital character IP style guide, which nobody cares about unless you're in licensing. So, which was a challenge in itself. So yeah, it depends. The first X-Men video game,
Yes.
I hold very near and dear to my heart because I think a lot of people are holding their breath to see if the idea of having a really strong creative and marketing hand on these projects were going to pay off. And that one paid off tremendous for everybody. I mean, the timing couldn't have been better. We sold out in, I think 2 weeks. Oh, no, 3 weeks. We sold out of the units that they thought would be on the shelves for 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
Like that's no, I still love that. So
I,
there are many.
and it's because of your work and that your team's work with Marvel that really kind of got the ball rolling to where we are today. What are your thoughts on sort of the evolution of the company from when you started as a colorist to this entity that is now?
It's amazing. And I'll be honest, I look at it through the eyes of somebody that was there in the 90s,
Mhm.
that was there through the big booms and then some really shallow lows that followed. Um, it's phenomenal. I think really the testament to Marvel is when you look, there are still people there with the company. Bill Roseman's working in games. He was in editorial forever and a day. Mark Panisha's still there. Tom Brevoort's still there. Like there's people still there and involved. Even freelancers
Mhm.
are still working with the company. And I think that there's no better testament to like how strong both the appeal is and the environment is than the people working there. So I love it, and I love to see some of the same. I love to see familiar names pop up in the credit rolls. uh, and in the books, I love to see some of those names in the books. Where I'm like, Dan Buckley is from back. I say back in the day, but Dan Buckley's back from the Marvels. Excuse me, back in the '90s.
Mhm.
There's teams of people that are there, and we're all friendly.
Right.
Like we all sort of aware of each other's names and whatever else. So and now social media has made it easier to keep in touch.
Yes.
Um, but I know I think the companies that it as a fan,
Mhm.
right? Do you say or you think you know it?
Right.
What I love is that the stigma's been removed.
Right.
That a kid, I love that a kid or an adult
Mhm.
can go buy a comic and not have that shame
Right.
that used to sort of hang over anybody
Yes.
that did that outside of a convention from the
Right.
70s and the 80s.
Mhm.
If you were in the store with the spinner racks, if somebody came in that you knew, you'd immediately like pull out a Good Housekeeping and start looking at that. You'd rather be seen reading anything else than a
Mhm.
comic, and that is not the case today.
All right.
I love Halloween is a favorite. I
Mhm.
love seeing a dozen Captain Americas come up of, every conceivable size, shape, color, creed,
Mhm.
they're coming up to and trick or treating the Spider-Man, Miles Morales version of Spider-Man. It still tickles me
Yeah.
this day. Um, but yeah, it's nice to see that we were right, sort of as fans, that there is something here. And the fact that I heard, I just came back from a trip,
Mhm.
business trip, and I heard a father and son
Mhm.
and daughter having a conversation about I couldn't place where it was in like Marvel cinematic whatever, but they were talking about Spider-Man and they were talking about Thanos. And it still blows my, you know what I mean? Like it blows my, they're talking about Thanos.
Right.
Nobody's supposed to know who Thanos is. And now there's a movie, there's
Right.
movies. That's great. That's great.
Do
So
you
I love it. I love it.
do you think the comics will catch up to the MCU? Because there's people who love Marvel, but when you say to them, "Hey, do you want to read a comic book?" No thanks.
You know, it's going to be what it's going to be. And I think that as long as there are comics out there, people are going to find them. And
Right.
people who don't want to, there's plenty of other stuff.
Mhm.
So if your complete and total interest is the cinematic universe and that's all you care about,
Mhm.
fantastic.
Right.
Now we can talk about Thanos. If you have some interest, there's video games, there's T-shirts, there's a lunchbox, there's theme parks,
Right.
do you know what I mean? There's something for everyone, and that flexibility is, with an intellectual property, is unprecedented. Um, so I love all of that, and I think as long as there are avenues
Mhm.
for people to find comics, they'll find them. I mean, I think the death knell for comics has been ringing since the 50s.
Yeah.
This newsstand carrier is going out of business. It's the end of comics.
Mhm.
And then it's not. And then the 60s, oh, they're consolidating distributors. It's the end of comics. And then it's not. Oh, there's a paper shortage. It's the end of comics. Then it's not. It's just like one after the other. And
Right.
it continues because there's something inherently, you know, great about the medium. So
Do you still have the itch at all to get into comics? Because I mean, nowadays with Kickstarters and everyone's putting out their own independent books, there's a lot of avenues to get back in if you wanted to.
yeah, there's a lot. I'm still friendly with a lot of people or directly friends with people in comics. I talk to a number of people, if not daily, then weekly.
Right.
And that fills, I think, the need for me, that sort of social interaction. To answer your question, yeah, I still get the little pangs
Right.
to do something. But I'm also doing a lot of other stuff that all, quite frankly, came out of comics in a weird way, or came out of my career, air quote, in comics. So, um, I really will still, if I get the itch, I'll go to a comic shop and I'll look around. I'll see what's going on. There's a lot of amazing independent stuff
Yeah.
being generated now that's phenomenal. I love the stuff that most of the image guys are doing, if not all of them. Um, the pang for me gets cured pretty quickly inside a comic shop or listening to podcasts if I'm gonna go there. So thank you for that. So
I also need to ask, coolest Stan Lee story that you have.
coolest Stanley story that I have. Okay, again a little name droppy.
Mhm.
So I'm walking down the hall at Stanley Media, headed to my office,
Mhm.
and out of the corner of my ear, Stan had an assistant that was across the hall from his office, and he yells, "Stan, Steve's on the phone." Now we had a Steve that worked in the office.
Right.
So I was like, well, that's weird. Steve just usually pops his head in. Like, why would he? Maybe he's on the road. I thought I saw him, whatever else. And I hear Stan pick up the phone. And again, this is all in seconds as I'm walking. I don't want to make it seem like I'm like leering in the hallway. And this conversation starts. And it's like, hey, hi. It's very friendly. And I'm like, oh, all right. And he Stan starts with it like, I know. We said co-creator. We always tell them co-creator. We can't correct. I'm telling you, it's in all of our materials. I'll send you a press kit. It's Ditko on the phone, and they are having this very sort of college roommate style barbing, jabbing each other. I mean, like they're talking about something serious, but at least Stan is laughing
Right.
and talking to him. And I had the pleasure of speaking with Ditko maybe two other times,
Okay.
but my geek brain was just blown wide open that these two, like, despite whatever anybody had heard, whatever's in the fan press, like whatever's going on, like, so that's like 99,
Right.
maybe 99, maybe early to, we'll just say it's 1999.
Mhm.
That, like, Ditko just gets on the phone to bust Stan's grapes, and
Right.
Stan is happy to take the call and bust his grapes back.
Right.
Like, that's amazing. That's amazing.
I was going to say because it's painted out like Ditko sits in a dark room throwing darts at pictures of Stan all the time over all this stuff, and you're painting a picture of, you know, two, I would say, old friends or old colleagues who, there was no real heavy animosity there between them.
I mean, again, I wasn't in his room
Right.
all the time. He might have had a dartboard. I don't know. Um, I will say that and again, I'm going to apologize for name dropping. When I was very young at Marvel,
Mhm.
there was a project that came up. I had a decent budget for it, and it was about there was some artwork. I think it was Fing Fang Foom or something we needed, and we were going to blow it up.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to get. I didn't want to use clip art because it wouldn't reproduce well.
Mhm.
So I called Ditko, which is only something that like a dumb kid does. He was so kind.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he turned the gig down, make no mistake, but he was very clear as to why. He said, no, thank you. He was the model of a respectable freelancer.
Wow.
And for the two projects that I called him about, and again, turned them both down,
Right.
was very pleasant about it, didn't hang up. In my super limited interactions with him, I didn't see angry Steve Ditko ever. So, the truth is that the complicated things are complicated, and we're always trying to simplify them down, and they're just not that way. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So, I do treasure that memory, though, because it's this moment where the not that we need reminders these days that what we see in the press may or may not be true, but it really did inform what, again, I had, other than those super limited interactions, I did not get to see underneath the hood.
Right.
But, everybody's got their own stuff.
Most definitely.
So, I by the way, I get it from both sides, but like for me, because I got to speak directly with Steve a few times, I just found him to be very upfront
Mhm.
and responsible is the bad word, but a responsible freelancer. It's amazing how much you learn, especially as a young person, from those little interactions.
Right.
So,
What have you been up to now? What's going on in your life right now?
I'm freelancing. There is a new project I've signed up for that I'm not allowed to talk about. People take their NDAs very seriously. I actually tried, and it's my fault, because I had computer issues this morning, but I tried to get permission to talk about it today, but I could not. Yeah, it's sort of carrying my work legacy through.
Nice.
I'm trying to learn. I was born in the Northeast, so I come with a lot of that sort of inherent baggage,
Yeah.
and it's very, I think that the here in California, the number of times I've had to say, like, I'm not very granola, but so, it's really just been a matter of sort of taking my hands off the wheel, but not off the brake.
Right.
So, oh, wait, not off the gas. There we go. You want to keep your feet completely off the brake at all
Yeah.
times. So, there's a lot of stuff, and I still check in with most of my comic related pals, again, weekly at least. So, there's a lot of that. It's a combination of corporate design and location based attraction specialist, I suppose.
Gotcha.
So
Well, we know when they take the shackles off, let me know and we'll
I
back
I'll,
on.
I'll be very excited to share. I will say this. it's another one of those surreal moments
Mhm.
where I'm sitting in a room going, how in the world did I get here?
The guy who colored
And
Excalibur is now handling these
it's
major projects.
really just and I love those moments too. But and I still guest lecture with Otis, one of the classes that we did, which used to be called Comic Book Heroes, and it may still be,
Okay.
which really deals with team collaboration in producing a comic with a pro-social message.
Right.
That was a lot. There's a group of the women that does the book Hex.
Okay.
Are They took that class over. They've done a phenomenal job, and I love to show up. And they're kind enough to invite the old guy back to talk to the kids, and that's really um, generally speaking. I will say something publicly.
Mhm.
It'll be a declaration, and I will mean it, and then that exact thing, the opposite happens.
Well,
So it's like who wants to teach? Those who do can, and those who can't teach. It is one of the most invigorating,
mhm.
like it reaffirms your love for whatever discipline you're teaching.
Right.
So when you're exhausted by graphic design, there is nothing like seeing a whole bunch of kids trying to like get back into the field and talk about it.
Right.
Same thing with typography,
Mhm.
storytelling, comics. It's phenomenal. There are students of ours that are over at almost every publisher, digital and otherwise. So it's really, teaching's, I got to be careful because if I say it out loud, the opposite will happen. But teaching or guest lecturing is also great.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, there's kids and life and
All this
all
other.
that other stuff. So,
Yes. Well, I just want to say, hey, thank you for coming on. And thank you for the wonderful your career you've had because things you've worked on have been part of our lives and will continue to be part of our lives and my kids' lives for years to come. And it's because of your hard work and your team's hard work, and it's been such a privilege.
thank you. And that's the part that still blows me away.
Mhm.
And I'd done an interview about the Pizza Hut X-Men promotion,
Mhm.
which, back then, we always wanted to do a great job and we always wanted to make sure we had this underlying internal edict,
Right.
which was, because at least three of us were fans, if not super fans of the books.
Mhm.
And if it didn't address our fan needs, then we weren't doing a good job. There always needed to be something
Right.
for us, but like 8-year-old, 12-year-old us. And
Exactly.
I'm blown away that there's a few comic artists that credit like the Joe Mad did an amazing placemat piece of artwork for us that credit that as, oh, I was tracing that over and over again. It's where I learned to draw. Well, it blows my mind that any of that's a placemat that was supposed to be covered in pizza grease and thrown away. It's not supposed to be behind lucite. But I'm thrilled to have been. I'm knocking on wood. Thrilled to have been a part of it, and hope I've still got some more to give.
I certainly think you do. And we are back. That was a really cool, like behind the scenes of what was going on at Marvel at the time, trying to get the name out there, trying to grow the brand, and Dana was a big part of that. Also, being able to work with Stan Lee calling him up to recruit him to be a part of it, I thought was pretty wonderful. And the guy just has an awesome, awesome career. I'm sure there's plenty more stories. We'd love to have him back. So, Dana, thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend. Go to our T Public shop, tpublic.com. Type Dollar Bandits. It is all working now. Get yourself some Dollar Bandits gear for the summer. Give it out for friends. Give it out for yourself. If you're going to cons, please wear our stuff. Let folks know that we are out there. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you soon.